Hello, my name is Colson Ayers, and today we are going to be talking about what were the causes and effects of the nuclear freeze movement. Why the nuclear freeze movement? Well, the reason I picked the nuclear freeze movement is because I found it interesting how many different people across the world came together to protest against the use of a nuclear arsenal. I also used cause and effect for my historical reasoning. This is because there are many causes leading to the movement, and many impacts came from it. Some of the most notable causes include Randolph Horsburgh, who initially started the movement. There was also a prevalent global fear over the rise of nuclear war, as both the U.S. and the USSR had been gaining nuclear weapons and were in active proxy war. This war was also known as the Cold War. The main effects of this movement had included political changes, primarily in the United States and Western Europe. Also, worldwide laws had been changed in how nuclear weapons were allowed to be produced and then exported. This was also a very important contributor to the end of the Cold War, as it was considered a large-scale global peace movement. For some extra historical context behind the movement, there was the Cold War from 1947 all the way to 1991, World War II, and the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is by far the closest the world has ever been to nuclear war. All of which raised global fear of a nuclear war. Détente, also known as the era of peace between the U.S. and the USSR, also ended. This furthered overall global tensions. People also started protesting the proxy wars and advocating for peace in general. Who was Randolph Horsburgh? Well, Randolph Horsburgh was a female political scientist. She was responsible for starting up the nuclear freeze movement in 1979. She started this with many grassroots movements across the United States. By 1982, the movement gained enough popular traction to even appear on the voting ballots at the time. With these new laws going against the creation of nuclear missiles having a moderately popular vote of 60%. There was a numerous amount of adverse effects, such as political changes where Ronald Reagan took advantage of this to gain the popular vote in the U.S. in the 1980s. And this overall affected the political climate in the United States. Another effect of this was the intense public pressure created by the movement, where in Europe alone there was a total of 3 million protesters across the continent. And in New York alone, there were nearly 1 million protesters, this being the largest in America's history. The most notable effect, however, was the contribution to the end of the Cold War, because both Americans and the Soviets across all of Europe wanted a nuclear freeze. There were even Soviet spies hidden in the U.S. population who were trying to sway the American people's ideals around the use of nuclear weapons. Though it should be noted, the Soviet Union's impact on Americans was relatively low. To conclude, the nuclear freeze movement was caused by an amalgamation of growing fear over nuclear war during Cold War times. During this, primarily the U.S. and the USSR were building a massive arsenal of nuclear weapons and growing tensions across the globe, and proxy wars would lead inevitably to fear over World War III and nuclear war in general. Many grassroots movements caused by activists like Randolph Horsburgh would bring people together to protest the use of nuclear arms and the testing and creation of said weapons. Some effects of the nuclear freeze movement were the heightened public involvement with how the government would use nuclear weapons and a change of how political figures, especially in the United States, would be less fond of war and leaned more toward peace in general. This also caused the United States and the Soviet Union to come to an agreement to reduce nuclear tensions, and overall, the nuclear freeze movement helped end the Cold War. Thank you for watching my presentation. These are the works cited, and also source 6 is a primary source.